Okay, so I'm going to open what I had from assignment M. Now, anybody who's working along with me, and I'd like everybody to go ahead and work along with me on this animation, because literally you can have a video done by the time we leave tonight. We'll go through it. I'll have enough time to help you with it. So I'm going to open up not my site M, but my house M. And if you didn't get the site and the house linked together yet, just open any one of your house files and we'll put the video in there. Basically, it's kind of like creating a perspective view like we did in assignment F, except that it's a whole series of perspective views and it's saved into that Revit file. You could do that, and you could call it house N. The problem would be if you went back, well, actually that wouldn't hurt anything because the house N would still be looking at site M. But if you went into the site M file, it would be looking at house M instead of N. And what we really want to do is we want to open the house file. Because the main reason we want to open the house is because when you place a camera, it says I'm going to go 5'5" above the level that you're on. And if we're in the site file, 5'5" above zero elevation level is down almost 90-some feet below the building, and you have to raise your eye and object point up high. So it works better if you go into the house. But I'm going to go ahead and open the site first and plop down a couple of trees because it'll make it a little more interesting that way. So if you want to do that with me, or if you just want to watch this part, you're welcome to. So I'm going to open my site M. I'm going to hope that it still finds the house M that's linked into it. I bet it will. Here it is. I'm going to go to my site L1 existing true north plan. I've got the AutoCAD, so I'm going to attempt to put trees in the same spot where the trees were really surveyed and see how that works. I'm going to put, especially this guy in the backyard, I want to make sure he's there. So to insert trees, we can go to Home, Component, and of course components are all hodgepodge together, alphabet soup-wise. There should be Tree RPC. And see how that says Tree Deciduous? And it does not have the letters RPC in it? That means that's an old tree that's still in the template from before Revit 2009 came along and upgraded the rendering process. So do not place the tree without the RPC. Instead, we want to load the tree families. And so we can go out of the box planting and see how all these plants start with RPC. And RPC is short for realistic photo content, and I'll just take a very brief second to show you where that comes from. If we go to the website archvision.com, archvision.com, that's a company that creates this RPC content, and it works in Max, Revit, AutoCAD, Photoshop, and other programs that aren't from Autodesk. And they've been around for a while, and so the first version of Revit had some really early people, and the people are pretty much the same as they've always been. The trees have been improved. But the way an RPC works is, let's say I have an RPC person, and what they've done is they've taken a photograph of the person from the front and from the side and from every probably 15-degree increments, and then you place these people in your model. So if I have somebody standing talking to someone else, we're looking at each other. If you place the camera over there and do a rendering, you're going to see my right side and the other person's left side. It's pulling up the photograph that was embedded in that RPC object. And trees are the same way, so if you look at the tree from the front or the side, you'll see the angle of the tree. They also cast shadows on the ground, which is pretty cool because they're really kind of photos built into something that knows how to cast a shadow. But to buy them now, it used to be you could buy a collection of trees or a collection of cars or whatever. Now this company, Archvision, if you want to get a bunch of them, they want you to do a subscription that you pay so much per month, and then you have access to all-you-can-eat diet of all the RPC objects. They've got people that are emergency responders, beach people, business people, school children people, and they've got tropical trees, deciduous trees, and all that. But you get a few with Revit still. And so if I go and load these 5, 6 families are what you get. There's a tropical tree, a shrub. So I'm going to load the shrub, the conifer, and the deciduous. And these, you can tell one of the old ones from one of the new ones is if you place one of those old ones that's not RPC anymore, it's going to look like a stick figure of a tree. And if you try to render it, it just disappears completely. And they were built as geometric objects that had a bunch of little leaves that were geometrically created in Revit. The people were RPC back then, but the trees weren't. And I left them in this file because I just wanted to point out the kind of difference between them. So if I go back now, I'd rather than using the component button, I'd rather go down to planting in my families on the browser. So the category of planting is what contains all the shrubs and trees. And you can also find RPC grass and RPC flowers, I think. But the other route you could go is just make a rendering and then paste these kinds of things into Photoshop. The problem is with people and trees, they're not going to be set up in the perspective properly unless you fudge it in Photoshop. But the ArchVision does allow you to buy a version that will help you kind of pretend to put it into the perspective in Photoshop. It's not as good. So I'm going to go to the RPC tree deciduous, and you'll notice that there's sizes along with the species names. So the family is RPC tree deciduous. The types are species and size. You can't create another species because it has to be built in photographs, but you can create another size. So I'm going to pick a something that could be big, like maybe this Shumard oak. That's a 30-foot tree. I'm going to drag it out here and try placing that in the front yard. Now, what Revit is doing is it's looking for the topo surface to plant the tree on. I'm looking at it in plan, but let's go to it in 3D and see if it worked. Sure enough, the tree is planted in the front yard, even though that front yard slopes at a fairly, significant slope. This little cardboard base that's in the tree is horizontal and the trunk is vertical. And if you take a look at that family, you can see that it says always vertical. Because otherwise, like a car, if you parked a car that was not always vertical on a slope, the four tires would sit on the slope, unlike the tree, which the base of the tree is sitting horizontally with the trunk up. So that's another property of families in Revit that you can do. It's kind of cool that it reads the topo surface and lets you plant it, so to speak. Now, I don't think that's quite big enough, so I'm going to take that one and edit the type and duplicate it. And I'm going to call it Shumard Oak 50 feet. And that much I can change because there's a height here, and I can just change it to 50. And notice how the plan gets bigger and the 3D gets bigger. And then I'm going to place another tree in the backyard. And just for variety, I'm going to use a different species on that. So I'm going to go to maybe a red maple. Drag it out there and plop it down. That's not big enough either. I'm going to try making maybe a 60-foot red maple. So I'm going to edit, duplicate red maple 50 or 60 foot. And I partially want to make that bigger because I know it's behind the house and I'd like to see it kind of peeking over the top of the house. So now I'm going to place a perspective camera just as a test. Remember, we've kind of already dealt with perspectives a little bit. Tonight we're going to deal with walkthroughs. But a walkthrough is nothing but a whole path that's strung together a series of frames of the cameras. So let's go back and go to the View tab and let's place a camera. And I'm just going to try it, and what's going to happen is it's going to be down at absolute 0 plus 5'6". And all I'm seeing is the AutoCAD, because that's the flat part of the AutoCAD at 0, and my terrain is up high, 90-some feet above my head. So if I was to stretch that up, that's a really dramatically exaggerated underside view of the house. So I'm going to undo that stretch, and I'm just going to go into the properties of this view, and I'm going to raise the ion object elevation up to 105.5. And that looks a little better. So now I'm standing 5'5" above where the first floor is. Now really, if I'm standing in the road, I'd probably be about 8 feet lower. So I'm going to drop it down to like 97.5 for both of them. And then I could actually raise the target up so that it's maybe 100 feet. So now I'm kind of looking uphill at the house, and I can see the top of that other tree peeking out over the top of it. And I do want to kind of mention one thing about 2013. Remember this realistic view. It does kind of an attempt to render the brick. It looks like that brick isn't, the material isn't right. So I'm going to go into Manage Materials and see if I can fix that. But in 2013, they've improved this realistic view so that not only does it show kind of the poor man's rendered view of the brick, it also shows the RPC object like you would see it if you render it. So I'm going to go into Masonry Brick. I'm going to go to the Appearance. And that's what it should look like. If I go back to Graphics and say Use Render Appearance for shading, it should kind of find the middle ground of that red. That's actually a little dark for my taste and a little dull. But it should still show the rendered view in the realistic. Let's try going to the default 3D and see if that works. Here's shaded, here's realistic, and for some reason that material is not cutting it. It could be that I'm in the file that's linked. So what I should do is go back to the house and see if that solves it. But I will go back to that perspective for a minute. And just as a preview, and I think from what I understand, Jonathan kind of fooled with rendering a little bit here. So if you go to the teapot light bulb button, that's your rendering dialog. And then we can do a draft level quality and just hit render. And then I like to uncheck this little checkbox that says close dialog when rendering is complete. That way it doesn't close this window and I can see, okay, it took 1 minute 30 seconds. Otherwise, if that's checked, if you don't look closely enough, it's gone and you don't know how long it took. So there it's actually pulling out the photographic image of the tree when it renders it. And so what I've read is that in 2013, if you go to that realistic view, it'll actually show that photographic version of the tree rather than the cutout version. So that's a big improvement. So now I'm going to save what I have in this site file, Site M, and close it because I think it'll be easier to do our walkthrough in the house file. So now I'm going to go back and open my House M. So now I'd like everybody to try this part with me. So I'm in the house file, and again, even if you didn't successfully link your site into it yet, you can go to your site plan, any site plan that you have in this file, and just make sure that the associated level is first floor. So now I can start my path, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to stand out in the middle of the road, and then I'm going to walk up the driveway and come around back so that I'm peeking in the back window. And remember, we built our topo based on the existing house, not on our addition. So I'm going to do the walkthrough in this existing site plan because it'll be a little bit more understandable than if the driveway slams into the addition and it doesn't make sense. So I'm going to go ahead and start this. So we go to View, look underneath House. So under the default 3D view, you've got Camera, and then you have Walkthrough. So the Footprints button. Okay, now this gets a little tricky here because we'll be in several modes. Let me finish that. It just occurred to me, and I haven't shared the monitor, so up until now it's been audio. Okay. Yeah, so much for that. Okay, so I'm going to review again. Let me just stop that recording. This is